Megan, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I've had other shows in the past. I'm a big fan of mushrooms. I think my audience will know that I do, psychedelic mushrooms. I do functional mushrooms. I've had shows on all sorts of mushrooms, but I've recently came across a new type of mushroom that I wanted to introduce my audience to that I thought was really cool. But before we get into some of your products, why don't you tell us like your background, the world you were in, and how you kind of stumbled upon these mushrooms in general?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think every good origin story starts with like pain or like a problem that someone has to overcome. It's usually not just like the happiest story ever where something just like falls into your lap magically and everything is good from the beginning. Um, but I am a dental hygienist by degree. So that was where my early training came from. And what I really loved being or what I loved about being a dental hygienist was the education and working with patients one-on-one and getting them to enroll in their health, teaching them how to be an advocate for their own health, starting with something as simple as the mouth. People think that it's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it's like, the gateway to your body, one of them. And it's really, really important. Your dental health, your oral health is tied to so many different things, including, predicting how long you're going to live. And even things like a healthy birth weight for your baby you know, um, cardiac disease and all these things. So I knew it was really important, and getting people to enroll and be an advocate for their own health was something that was like my personal, patient goal with everyone I saw. And that really primed me for what I do in the world now. But this is, really where my story starts, is like being a dental hygienist and also going through my own health journey. I will keep this short because it could be a whole podcast in and of itself. The hormone and health hellhole that I went through, that was completely self-induced, by the way. It was very much like, oh, there's this thing called intermittent fasting. I'm totally going to do this. Well, as a 27-year-old woman, fasting every day until 1 p.m. is like not the greatest when you do it for like a year and a half straight. And long story short, my hair was falling out, my face was blowing up in cystic acne. I had abs and looked great in a bikini, but like I had zero estrogen. So this was again all self-induced. My thyroid wasn't working. I was fainting. It was not good. But I thought I was being healthy. I thought I was like doing good things. I heard on these podcasts like these different modalities for health, quote unquote. And really had to learn the hard way of like that health is not just about external validation from others or what you look like in a bikini, but like, how do you feel? How are your sex hormones? Like, can you get through a day without fainting? And so I really had to reorient myself with my own relationship to food and exercise specifically. And so I was working through all of this, and I was very, very intrigued by, okay, clearly that's not how you do it. There's something wrong here. I really want to educate myself and learn like what true health is, and, down the rabbit hole of books and podcasts and just consuming everything I could. And as a dental hygienist, um, I was already like in the world of functional mushrooms, started with Four Sigmatic, as we mentioned before we pushed record. Like, I think that's where a lot of people start. It's like taking the little like packets of reishi or cordyceps little coffees or whatever. And so I was on that train and really like fascinated by mushrooms. And then one day, in our dental practice, I was practicing in Seattle. Um, One of our patients she was like, I think in her late 50s, she had been diagnosed with HPV. And I knew what HPV was. I knew that there wasn't really any like good options for people. There's the vaccine, but like, it doesn't really work on clearing infections. And there's a whole slew of other problems we won't get into right now. But I knew that there wasn't really an answer for women. And this woman in particular, she had said that her doctor, her naturopathic doctor, had recommended this quote unquote mushroom for her to help clear her HPV. And it worked. And, if anyone knows anything about HPV, or if there's any doctors listening, as you age, get into 40s, 50s, 60s, they really like discount your immune system and your immune system's ability to clear something like HPV. They're just kind of like, well, you're over 35, so this is going to be really hard for you to clear, which is totally not accurate. And so she said that she took this mushroom she called AHCC, and it worked. It helped her clear the HPV in, a matter of months. And so this really piqued my interest, and I immediately got on Dr. Google. I was like, what is this stuff? I've never heard of this mushroom. And quickly saw that it had its own research organization, that there was like quite a bit of clinical research behind this thing that I had never heard of. And I was like, I've been in like the wellness space for a while now. Why haven't I heard of this? Kind of like little ego trip. and and then I just kind of went down this rabbit hole of learning about it and haven't stopped for like 7 or 8 years now. And that's how I learned about it. That's how I became sort of passionate about it. We're 7 or 8 years into this, and now we provide AHCC to people all over the world. And it's really rewarding work, and hearing from people just life-changing testimonials, not only for HPV, but I'm sure we'll get into things like Lyme and autoimmune skin conditions, even cancerous tumors. And so I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur, but here we are, and really grateful for my dental education and career, and that really primed me for this passion in patient or client education.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And HPV is, I don't know, it's super, super common, obviously. And I know that some people feel they get the diagnosis and they feel gross and sick, and we can get into a lot of that. And it's not really talked about on podcasts. So I'm kind of glad we're bringing it up, but it's very, very common. I mean, I'll just tell my own personal story with how I found out about HPV. I was literally like, I think like 19 or something, and I'm an open book, so I don't mind. I had broken up with my like high school girlfriend, and I was like in college, and I was just kind of being crazy and sleeping around and doing the things that I just
College
would
kids
probably
do.
not do again. Looking
Yeah.
back now, I'm in a committed relationship and father, and I've been with my wife 10 years and all, but I was young and crazy and was out drinking, and my ex goes, because apparently men can't even really get checked for it. Maybe they can now. This was like 20 years ago. She told me that men can carry it, and we just wouldn't know. And she had basically told her that I gave her HPV. And then there was even an instance where I think she got like part of her cervix taken out. And knowing what I know about the medical system now, maybe she did that and should have done some more research and not done that. I don't know. And she was claiming like maybe she wasn't going to be able to have children. So I was like starting to feel kind of bad, because it was probably my fault because I was out just being reckless. But she does have a kid now, and someone else obviously. But so glad that all worked out for her. But it was kind of daunting in the moment, thinking that I may have like did this thing that I'm asymptomatic basically, but still gave it to her, and I can't get checked for it. And I'm like, this is kind of a wild scenario of how am I carrying around this virus, quote unquote, that like I don't have any symptoms of, and I can't even get checked for, but yet I just gave it to somebody who's potentially not going to even be able to get pregnant moving forward. I think it's wild. So I'm glad we're going to do some education around it. So like, what exactly is HPV? Is any of that stuff that I learned when I was 18 completely false? Like, let's break it down.
Yeah, no, that's all spot on, honestly. But yeah, HPV stands for human papillomavirus, and it is definitely both a men and women issue. Upwards of like 80 to 90% of sexually active people will come into contact with and have to deal with HPV at some point in their life, whether they know it or not. Like you said, you're not even able to get tested. That's currently factual. There is
Wow.
no FDA approved easily accessible test for men. Now, does the technology exist? Yes, because there's clinical research on, HPV involving both men and women. So the technology exists. It requires a skin sample, and looking under a microscope and things like this. But there's not currently anything that's easily accessible. Even if you go to, your local clinic and you're like, give me the works for STD, whatever, and they give it all to you. HPV is probably not going to be on there unless they've got something that I've never read about, because it's really, really frustrating, honestly, for both men and women, because there's really good men out there, obviously, that they're like, I want to know, so that I can be, honest and upfront with the women that I'm with, or with my partner, or whatever. Or in your situation, you're carrying around like some level of guilt for something you didn't even know that was like you were navigating and your body was working through. So it's really unfortunate for both men and women. And then on the women's side, because we do get these, every couple of years we go and get a pap screen, they, swish around in there, and then they culture it and see like, okay, what's going on? Is this normal? How does everything look in there? There's no equivalent for men. And so we get the positive result of HPV and then carry around the diagnosis of HPV positive. And, so a lot of people think that it is a woman's issue, when in fact, it's human papillomavirus. It's not woman papillomavirus. And so this is one of the issues, I think, from the very beginning on education, is one, how common is it? Which is, I just told you, like upwards of 80 to 90% of people who are sexually active. And then, just kind of putting it on the woman's shoulders to like figure out by herself. And that really causes a lot of problems, not only between couples, because dude guys like, what have you been doing? This is, can come at her with like shame, and not everyone, obviously, but like, because he doesn't know that he has it, or he was the one that passed it to her. Like, you don't know who exposed who, unless you've only been with one person in your life ever, then it's impossible to know who exposed who. And so it's one of those things that's very confusing. It's very frustrating, and it sort of leaves people on an island to, figure it out for themselves. And then, yeah, the point of your story, like she had part of her cervix removed. That's called a LEEP procedure. It's a loop electroexcisional procedure, where they take a hot wire basically and kind of remove part of the cervix that has those damaged cells. And now the cervix goes from being about this tall, about 2 inches or whatever it is, to now they've shaved it off to here. And so that can cause problems with, the cervix opening up, in dilation during labor. There can be scar tissue that's really can be problematic. And so there's the mainstream conventional system of medicine doesn't have great options for women who do test positive. And I'll stop there and take a breath. But yeah, it's a big problem that honestly and unfortunately not a lot of people talk about, which, I've kind of taken up a little bit of a mantle to like talk about it. Not that I don't know that I've ever dealt with it myself. But I've heard thousands and thousands of stories at this point that it feels very personal to me to help kind of uncover and support women and men, but mostly women, through this diagnosis and healing, really.
Yeah, that's great, because I do think there was obviously, like, I was kind of young and reckless and still had a little bit of shame where when you think that you may have just caused somebody to not be able to have kids, or there would be problematics with their pregnancy moving forward later in life, and that's kind of hard to listen
Mm-hmm.
to. And I was just kind of like, I don't, but I really didn't understand it. I was so young. I'm like, what do you mean
Yeah,
that I can't get tested or get checked
I
out as
know.
well? So has HPV always been around? Is it just more common because we're clearly way more sexually active as a society than we used to be? Is it new? Is it, did it come from a lab like COVID? Why is it so prevalent now? But like, I don't feel like my mom's generation or anyone was like
Mm-hmm.
speaking about HPV, because if it was so common, from like my mom, I think she would have been like, hey, be careful. You can get
Mhm.
HPV. It's, 90% of people can get it. But I didn't hear anything about it literally until my ex told me about it. And I was like 19 or 20 or something like that.
Yeah. It's not new per se. Like there was people working on, treatments and diagnosis and the vaccine for years and years. I think that it was first, oh, I should have studied up on the timeline here. For HPV specifically, I think it was like the 1930s or 40s. It was like observed and they were trying to like figure out like what is this thing? I mean, HPV in general is very mysterious. It's not just one thing. There's over 200 strains of HPV that fall under the umbrella of human papillomavirus. Just like the flu, like there's not just one strain of the flu. That's part of the intelligence, if you want to call that, of viruses in general, is they're able to mutate and morph and, change over time and adapt to their environment. And so there's really two buckets of strains that they call low risk and high risk. And so the low risk strains, with this really common ones would be like strains 6 and 11 that can cause things like genital warts, where it's kind of annoying. It's not the funnest thing, to share with a partner or whatever. They are, can be considered contagious through skin to skin, but you're not going to die from it. Like it's really, sort of benign. They're just more like annoying. And then the high risk strains are named as such because they can be associated with some cancers. And I want to stop there because there's someone listening right now. There's probably a woman listening who either just got diagnosed, she just got the news from her doctor, or she's been dealing with this for some time. And as soon as you say the word cancer, people tend to freak out. And so I want to stop here and just really like drive home that even of the, 14 million people who are diagnosed or who get this positive test result in the US every year, around only 1% of them will go on to be anything close to cancerous. Okay. So the odds are very much in your favor. There's a 99% chance that it won't ever turn into, cancer, but it's not something that we can ignore, right? There are still cases of cervical cancer and it's a nasty disease. As far as like, the pain and everything like that. It's not pretty. And so it is something to take seriously, but it's also not something to just immediately freak out about as soon as you hear the words HPV. And I've heard it all. I'm freaking out. I feel so gross. Like my body's betrayed me. I don't know how this happened. Like I've only been with 2 people in my life and I've heard it all. So I just want that to be really clear that like, it's not necessarily a time to freak out. It's more of a time to be like, kind of reflect, like an invitation to evaluate your lifestyle. And we all get these from time to time. It could come up as Lyme or as an autoimmune condition or cancer or, IBS or, whatever the thing is that we're dealing with in our health. It's this time to reflect and this chance to really ask, like, how am I treating myself? How am I treating my immune system? Am I sleeping? Am I eating well? And really like take everything into account. So that's how I see HPV is it's really just an invitation to evaluate how you're treating yourself because stress and HPV are intimately linked. And as our stress levels go up, there's an inverse direct relationship with our immune system and the specific immune cells like NK cells that really help manage viral particles and cancerous mutated cells and bacteria and all these different pathogens. If those are at 0, you're basically dead. So we want to keep them as high as needed. And so this is something that, we talk a lot about with the women who are diagnosed is like, hey, don't freak out. Let's take it seriously, but also, this is just your body is, sending you some signals here that it needs some support. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a sigh of relief. So don't freak out. Only 1% actually ends up being cancerous stage. And good thing that at least I guess women are getting pap smears somewhat regularly, most women. So you probably catch it, I would think, early on if you're doing regular pap smears. So that's at least a good sign from that. And you kind of almost went into one thing I wanted to ask because after dealing with my own personal journey through Lyme and I had tons of heavy metals and parasites and all the all of the detox work that I do with my clients now. Excuse me. Um, I starting to wonder if some of these, because you said it's obviously if they're dating back to the 30s or 40s, whatever the timeline was, I'm wondering how much of these viruses or whatever label we put on these different pathogens are just like a result of like stress, toxicity, like what our immune system back when it was more resilient, maybe, you know, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, we didn't really, we may have been exposed to HPV, but we didn't really respond to it like we do now. But now we have geoengineering and pesticides, and you know, people are living in moldy buildings. We have a very crazy high stress bucket. I mean, I haven't worked with a single client, even if they think that they feel pretty good, who doesn't release quite a bit of heavy metals on my program. I mean, it's just very, very common. So how much do you think it's actually just the immune response as opposed to like how toxic HPV actually is to the body?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point to bring up. There's I forget the exact number, but it's in the, billions and trillions of viruses in the world. If viruses wanted us all dead, we would all be dead, a long time ago. And so it's really like I don't necessarily view viruses as this like these killers that are out to get us. Like they're not even like technically alive and making like decisions. They need very specific environments. And yeah, if you listen to someone oh gosh, I have pregnancy brain right now. I'm gonna forget his name, but he's one of my favorite doctors. He is I can't believe I'm forgetting his name right. It's literally just farted out of my brain. Um He's on he talks all the time about anyways, it's gonna hit me in like,
What's he talk about?
he is Zach
Bush?
yeah, sorry, yes, that Zach Bush. That's really embarrassing because it's like he's literally
He's one of
like,
the
what am
best.
I yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Dr. Zach Bush, like I get his newsletter and like, he's, probably on my like top tier list of like, ideal guests ever. But anyways, Dr. Zach Bush talks about all the time the stress in our environment that elicits these viruses to mutate and change. And I think that has definitely, something to do with this. Over the years, humans have, really gotten away from a nature-based lifestyle and even just the food that we eat and the air that we breathe and everything like that. And so I think as stress increases in the environment, so too do the viruses that we experience. And so, I'm not an expert on that, but I do think that there is a strong correlation. And it makes sense because I see it on the micro with a woman who comes to me who's like crazy stressed and she knows it, and just recently got a diagnosis of HPV. She's like, yeah, this has been the most stressful year of my life. I got divorced, or I went through bankruptcy, or even like having a child. Even something that's exciting can be a stress right, like a big stress. And even planning your wedding, I hear all sorts of things, but what's consistent is, yes, I've gone through a very stressful period, and now there's this, diagnosis, and it's not 100% of the cases, but it's enough for me to see that is like a very important trend to pay attention to. So yeah, I think that there is definitely a strong correlation there.
Yeah, that makes sense because obviously can't get checked for HPV, but as I continued to detox and eliminate all these things and feel better, I had like, I don't know, 5, 6 like random warts on my toes and fingers that just fell off as I got healthier. I don't ever, I used to get cold sores like a couple times a year. I don't get those anymore, which seem to be like viral in nature.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know if viruses are real. I had Dr. Thomas Cowan on, and I'm
I
like, I
know.
don't know where I even stand I'm not a virologist, but we
Yeah.
have to have some name to describe what we're trying to attack with some of this stuff like HPV. And so I'm kind of in the middle. I'm like, it doesn't really change my views very much. And he's
Mm-hmm.
very compelling and very funny. So it was a cool
Yeah.
show. But,
Yeah.
for the context of the show, we'll just call it a virus, whatever it is that's showing
Yeah.
up on these screenings. But, even things like cold sores, which is technically like herpes virus, even though it's like whatever type 2 or whatever, I just don't get it anymore. And do I no longer have that, or does my immune system just not respond to that? Whatever it may be, my stress bucket's a lot lower. because I do all the right things and take all the right supplements, and I've detoxed tons of my toxicity over the years. So I think that there is definitely a part where our immune system is really, it's gone awry. It's not
Yeah.
really, it's not handling stressors like it used to. And even things like pregnancy, that's why my program I give, it's called, I use HTMA to do what we call mineral balancing. I think it's really great for prenatal and for children and for breastfeeding because of the mineral depletion. Even when you can eat regenerative, you can eat organic, you can eat whatever you want, the soils are just still depleted. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of tending to the soil to bring back what we used to get from just normal food back even like 100 years ago. So I think they say you got to eat like 6 oranges to get the same amount of like vitamin C that you get from one orange today. A lot of cabbage and weird stuff doesn't have calcium in it anymore. So if you're, allergic to dairy, you're like super calcium deficient. We're very zinc deficient. So a lot of that stuff plays a role in our immune system as well. And I think we just don't handle the stress of the environment. But I guess that's where something like this, if I can say it right, AHCC comes in. Thanks for correcting me before the show so we could spit that out correctly. AHCC is this kind of immune modulating supplement we can take in a way. And so why don't you tell us exactly like why this is different from just taking like cordyceps or reishi? Like what is it and why it's different?
Yeah. No, you got it right. AHCC. Everyone, I've heard all combinations of, letters that don't belong in there. They take letters out, and it doesn't bother me at all. Obviously, it is not necessarily an easy combination of letters, which is one of the reasons why, as I mentioned to you, like a lot of people don't know about this, even though it's got a pile of clinical research behind it, and it's been around since the 80s. This is not like something that just came out last year. So AHCC is a patented cultured mycelial product. So it has a patent on the manufacturing process, and it is cultured in a way that's very unique from other mushroom supplements. It comes from the mycelia of several hybridized mushroom strains, including shiitake. And part of this is, proprietary. They don't share is patented, like they don't go into every tiny little detail with the common, Deborah on the street. It's, this is one reason why it's proprietary, it's patented, but this is what we understand about it. So the way that it's cultured is very different than other mushroom products out there. So when you look at something like, if you were to go to Amazon and type in like, let's see, like reishi supplements, okay, there's going to be a wide variety, probably in the 20,000 range on results. And most of them are not even going to contain reishi mushroom because, the supplement industry is not regulated. I'm not necessarily for regulation in the supplement industry, but this is one of the challenges is that, you find something on Amazon and you kind of have no idea what is actually in here. And so HCC is different because it has a manufacturing standard equal to that of any pharmaceutical. Say what you want about pharmaceuticals, the thing that they do get right, aside from some very important life-saving drugs, of course, the thing that they do get right is every tablet is identical, right? And it has to be. That is unique to AHCC in the world of supplementation. Every capsule of AHCC is identical to the original. Every batch of AHCC comes from one super mega sample in an ISO certified deep freezer. So they ensure they do extra testing to make sure that every capsule is identical. So that's one way that it's unique to other mushroom supplements. Another way is the way that it's cultured. It actually goes through a really important enzymatic process that breaks down the molecules into, a smaller version. So we've all heard of beta glucans, probably, if you know anything about mushrooms. They have their own benefits. I love, beta glucans and the benefits that they have. But there's also, a smaller version of these polysaccharides called alpha glucans. And AHCC is mostly made up of these broken down alpha glucans that are even smaller. So Beta glucans are huge molecule. Alpha glucans, the way that it goes through this enzymatic process is much smaller, more bioavailable, and easily absorbed by us. And so this is why AHCC is so much more potent than just taking, a capsule of shiitake mushroom or reishi mushroom or whatever. It's more bioavailable for the body. So AHCC is not a mushroom in and of itself. You're not going to go to a forest and, find an AHCC mushroom. It goes through this very specific process. So it's a cluster of compounds that comes from the mycelia of several hybridized mushroom strains. And so it's really interesting though, because these Japanese researchers and scientists were studying a slew of mushroom strains in the 80s, and they were specifically looking for how these strains affected immune cells, specifically NK cells, these natural killer cells that I mentioned earlier, that are so important to the immune system surveillance. The NK cells are like the assassins of the immune system. There's specific cells that do have, different jobs in the immune system. And this is one of the most important because these NK cells don't need permission from anyone or anything inside the immune system to take out something that looks dangerous, like a viral particle or a pathogen, bacteria, a mutated cancerous cell. And so these are really important when it comes to all different types of diseases and conditions, anything really related to the immune system. But they were looking specifically for, cancer research. And so they identified this strain was really, really effective for boosting NK cell basically activation and awareness. So it's increasing the immune surveillance of the host. And so when you do that, there's a whole that's only one mechanism of action. We can get into the other mechanisms as well. But a whole positive cascade of things happens when you amplify the innate immune intelligence. So I'll stop there, see if you have any questions on any of that. But that's basically what AHCC is and how it came about, and why it's different.
Yes, just to recap it, so it's not an actual mushroom itself. It's mushrooms we're already familiar with, but it's the processing of them, the extracting them, the culturing, and, it's hybridized, all the things that they don't really release to us, which I don't always care about. Like, some people are really crazy around like patents and proprietary blends. I'm kind of like, does the research say it's good? Actually at my company, I was kind of always against proprietary blends, and then some company in Germany completely just ripped off our entire formula and made basically like the same thing. And I was kind of like, wow, maybe proprietary blends aren't all that bad for someone to just completely mimic your entire supplement and sell it overseas. But so I'm kind of like back and forth with that. But the research seems to be great. I was asking Rock, I was reading some papers on it. I feel pretty good I've only been on it for probably like 2 or 3 weeks, so nothing crazy, but do seem to feel pretty good on it. And so it seems like, from what I gathered, seems like it's similar to regular mushrooms, where it's almost adaptogenic in nature, where it's like if you kind of have this low level of immune response going on, it'll kind of ramp it up. But then some people, they're like overreacting from an immunological standpoint, where they're like hypersensitive to foods and anything that they come in contact with, where they kind of need their immune system to kind of slow down a little bit, back off. They're just, you can have histamine responses or mast cells. So is it working in a way where it is kind of balancing the immune system, not just, automatically like ramping up the immune system? Because some people need it to kind of back off a little bit. So is it adaptogenic in that way?
Yes, absolutely. You said it perfectly. It really is. It does have a balancing and normalizing effect. A lot of people, if you were to go to WebMD or whatever, and I have a whole blog about this because I get these questions all the time where it's like, hey, I have an autoimmune disease and my doctor told me to stay away from immune boosters. And I'm like, it's not an immune booster. It can do that if you need that, but it's not just going in there and haphazardly boosting the immune system. It's really, really intelligent. Like, mushrooms in and of themselves are like some of the most fascinating, intelligent beings in the whole, I think, in all of nature, honestly. And so it's not just like a plant. It's not just like taking any other plant. It's actually closer to animals. Like the intelligence is really, really remarkable. And so it's not just going in and haphazardly like increasing these cells that you don't need. It's really adaptogenic and intelligent. And yes, it can affect, it can balance someone who, you know, like in the case of HPV or cancer, does need a boost to their immune system, and they do need these NK cells to ramp up. And in the case of someone like my sister who has rheumatoid arthritis, and it's an autoimmune condition, and she is, you know, having an overactive response from her immune system, AHCC has been one of the only things that has worked for her aside from a pharmaceutical, and there's no negative side effects. And so and that's just one example. I talk to people all the time, people with like Sjogren's, Crohn's disease, hidradenitis suppurativa, like, and there's so many different autoimmune conditions. I think a lot of them don't even have really like names. They're kind of just like, there's something going on here. So it's not, it is very intelligent and has a balancing and normalizing effect on the immune system. And what's even crazier is, say, you know, a woman comes to me with HPV and clearly like, okay, this needs to be boosted, but she also has an autoimmune disease. So what about that situation? AHCC can affect both things at the same time, because there's, again, a slew of immune cells that have different jobs in the body, and it can positively benefit these specific immune cells that, you know, say are working with the T and B cells of the adaptive immune branch, right? And then there's the NK cells that are part of the innate branch of the immune system, and it can positively affect both branches of the immune system, and therefore help someone who does have an autoimmune disease, but they also do have HPV. So I get that question a lot, and, you know, it's really, really just astounding that it has this level of intelligence. Yeah, but you said it perfectly. Yeah, it's really balancing for the body.
Yeah, I just see it. I mean, most times by the time people are coming to me to do a hair test and want to do a detox program, they're usually already burnt out. So I get like the sicker end of the population. Generally, they didn't give me money because they feel great. They paid for a hair test and a consultation because they already have a bunch of stuff going on, or they've already seen other doctors and stuff like that. So I kind of get a whole run of the gamut of symptoms that I see with people and diagnoses where they're either hype, you know, they almost respond to nothing and then nothing works, or some people are just like sensitive to everything. So it's kind of cool in that way. It might be interesting to dabble in some of those clients with this on top of my normal program, because I think it would be totally fine to add in. So I might do that just with a few clients here and there when they come to me with certain diagnoses already, and see how that responds with all of the minerals and the nutrients and the diet and stuff that I put them on. Would be really cool. So let's stick to the HPV for a moment. So have you seen, I don't know exactly what the tests look like. Obviously, there's a bunch of different strands for HPV. You're getting the pap smear. So have you seen, like, basically someone's got HPV, they take, you know, your supplement, the AHCC for a while, and then now the HPV, does it show up negative over time, or how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have hundreds of these stories. I get, I get these. This is the most common feedback that we get from women, for sure, is it helps me clear HPV. And this is everything from women who just got diagnosed and their doctor's giving them really no good options as far as like, how do I help my body heal? Okay, the doctors usually say, come back in a year and we'll retest you, or they want to do a colposcopy, which is like a sort of like a biopsy. And then, some will recommend a leap where it's like, well, let's just get rid of the damaged tissue or whatever. So I see everything from women who are just diagnosed, who immediately like have been following me, or their friends sent them my Instagram or something like that, or a podcast, where they know immediately, like, I can help my immune system and I'm going to do that. And so I see it, just a couple months, they go back to their doctor and things look fine. I've seen that versus, women who have been dealing with this for 2, 5, 7, 9, 20 years, getting positive results for HPV or abnormal pap or cervical dysplasia, which is if your listeners aren't aware, cervical dysplasia is where the cells on the cervix start to change, and they start to change in a negative way. And if left untreated, and if that just goes and goes and goes, it can turn into, something like cancer. It takes usually decades to get there, so it's not like a overnight thing at all. So really, it is important to, like, as soon as you have this diagnosis or get this positive result or abnormal cells or whatever, that you do start supporting your immune system ASAP. And AHCC is just one piece of the puzzle. Like, as you know, you just mentioned like so many other things that are like these big boulders when it comes to our health expression. AHCC is one of those things that you can do basically overnight. Getting the bottle in your hands and starting to take the supplement is going to help optimize your immune intelligence and surveillance. But also, we want to look at the other things too. And so, yeah, I mean, I have heard tons of stories of women who only really changed one thing, and that's taking AHCC. Now, maybe they already had like a pretty healthy lifestyle. But I do encourage women to look at every aspect of your lifestyle. How much are you drinking? Are you smoking? How are you treating yourself? Like, what are the words that you're telling yourself on a daily basis? Are you in a toxic, abusive relationship? Are you burning the candle at both ends? Are you going through the drive-through 5 times a week? Are you drinking tap water? Like, all of these things do play a part in our health expression. But to answer your question, yes, I get these feedback testimonials from women basically weekly, of oh my gosh, thank you so much, I'm so glad I took this. My doctors are shocked. I've had this for 5 years, and they're kind of shocked or whatever. And so we hear it all. It's really, really rewarding, because like I said at the beginning, women sort of feel like they're on an island to figure this out themselves. And their doctors don't really give them good advice when it comes to healing. Yes, they might have testing and biopsies and procedures, but that's not helping you heal. That's just like, turning off the check engine light. You're not addressing anything on the inside with your immune system or your health expression. You're just like, well, let's just get rid of the body part that's causing this problem, or that this problem is manifesting in. And so, to me, it's like, if it comes down to the immune system, in order to clear HPV, whether it's just so low in the body that it's not coming up on a test, or whether it's cleared forever, we don't really know, which is very frustrating. But if it's up to the immune system, why do we not start there? And it's like, it's common sense for you and I, but like, the mainstream medical system, for all of their genius when it comes to emergency medicine, hasn't figured this out yet. And it's really, really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it takes a while to develop into something. Thinking back to that story that I shared, my personal story with my ex from when I was younger, seems like she may have been able to maybe take a product like this, prolong that procedure, and then see if it would have went away. And then maybe if you still need the procedure, a year down the road or whatever, then you think that through. I don't know if everyone's even progresses to needing a procedure. It doesn't sound like it. Sounds like it's a giant gamut of different things that happen, some with pretty much no symptoms, some that go all the way to cancer, and then things in between. But it does sound like for the majority of people, it does take a while to progress. So if you are like listening to this show and somebody who has HPV or is freaked out about it or just got diagnosed, well, you could at least start here and then maybe clean up your diet and start trying some other things, but at least add this in, see if you start to get more of a negative response over the next few pap smears before rushing into even rushing to your own, like your own demise, like your own mental, like telling yourself this is going to become cancer. Well, then that becomes cancer, instead of searching out for results and saying, maybe I'm going to take this mushroom, clean up my diet, maybe not sleep around, however that looks for you. I'm sure it's easier said than done, whatever. We all like to be sexual at times, but
I will, if I can just pull on that thread for just a second, because this is an important kind of myth to bust, because I've spoken to plenty of women who got a positive HPV test after the first time that they had sex when they're like 18, 19 years old or whatever. one of my best friends tested positive after her first sexual experience with a long-term boyfriend that she loved. I've spoken to um, people who were virgins until they got married and then expressed positive. So their partner had been with someone else previously, but they were themselves a virgin until they got
Yeah.
married. I've spoken to people, plenty of women who are like, I've only been with 2 people in my entire life and I'm 40 years old. Like the myth that this only happens to people, that you only get a positive result if you're sleeping around, or if you're, a little more promiscuous with your love life or whatever, that is absolutely not the case. Now, when you think about it as a numbers game, of course, you're increasing your probability of being exposed to something the more people that you are, intimate with, but that doesn't, it's not just like promiscuous people. It's literally, anyone and everyone in between. So that is definitely something that I, have to kind of like work back with women, because they're like, I don't get it. Like, this is like, I'm really not this kind of person or whatever. And it's just like in the societal psyche, it's in the
Yeah.
zeitgeist that HPV means you're promiscuous. And that is absolutely not the case.
I mean, at 80-90% statistically, it's just potentially bound to happen. That's a pretty high. Like if you've ever taken a statistics class, when you get into 80 and 90%, that's like ridiculous. Like it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
Evaluations, and when you're reading statistics, it's almost never at 80-90% for certain things. And I think it really does boil down to a lot, probably that men cannot be checked very easily and then start to pull back. Like you can get, you have whatever, chlamydia or whatever these other, sexually transmitted infections or diseases, whatever they call them nowadays. When you can get checked for that or have symptoms of that, then you go get checked. Then you kind of back off, or you tell a partner. Like that's more normal. But when the guy's just walking around like I was, I had no idea. I just was just being normal and being a guy. I had literally not a single thought in the world that I would have a symptom of anything. So I do think that that's probably the trickiest part of it all. But back to the point where you shouldn't freak out. You should, do some more research, realize that only 1% goes into that cancerous state. And also you have time, and you might as well try to clean up your lifestyle a little bit and maybe take something like this supplement we're speaking about here and try to see if maybe it goes away. And then if it doesn't with just a supplement, then maybe you got a little bit more deeper work to do. Like stuff that I do with metals and maybe mold or anything that can happen. But you don't want to, a big part of my healing, I always say, is, was my the way I talk to myself. And this was probably from a few psychedelic ceremonies I had that helped, but it really helped me at least reframe, because I was so sick. Like I just wanted to kind of give up. But after a few psychedelic ceremonies, I at least felt worthy of healing and always told myself I would heal. And I think that was a big part of me healing. And you can't sit around in loops all day. And so good for you for actually talking to these women, because they probably are in some form of spiral. And
Yeah.
that spiral can probably turn into a lot of those looping thoughts that will basically, I think, transform into a cancer, instead of reframing and saying, hey, listen, let's just clean it up. Let's take the supplements. But good to know. And so I want to transition into, because we've obviously talked about my story a little bit. So I like to talk about Lyme, and it seems like there's some other things that this may be good for. So what have you seen in some of the Lyme cases when they're taking the AHCC?
Yeah, so I'll start with the clinical research and then kind of share some anecdotal evidence. So there was a study in 2019. It was a small open label pilot study. Most of the studies that I talk about with AHCC are going to be on the smaller side of studies. Like it's not going to be 10,000 people in a study, because the NIH does not fund studies that cannot lead to a pharmaceutical being approved by the FDA. And so because AHCC is a functional health food, it's not ever going to be regulated by the FDA. So therefore can never be recommended as the definitive treatment for something like HPV or Lyme, despite how much clinical research and how many testimonials are behind it. So just want to put that out there, that when I talk about the research, and if, your listeners go and click on some of these and read through them, like, this is such a small study. It's like, yes, it has to be. It would be insanely expensive to run some of these studies without the funding of the NIH, and they just don't fund studies, large studies that can't lead to a pharmaceutical. So that's the disclaimer. But with this study in 2019, they had a group of patients who were diagnosed with Lyme disease, ranging from very mild to severe. And as you know, like, living with Lyme can be absolutely debilitating. Like, you have the flu every day. You don't want to get out of bed. Your joints hurt. You're constantly like not able to regulate your temperature, fever and achiness. And it feels like horrible flu-like symptoms every day of your life, which is pretty miserable. So they looked at a range of symptoms that these patients were presenting with, everything, like I said, from joint pain to neurological issues to temperature regulation to just a overall feeling of being miserable. And so they ranged from 18 years old to, I think, 80 years old. So a good range of people and experiences. And they gave everyone in the study, again, it's a pilot study, they gave everyone in the study 3 grams of AHCC for 8 weeks. And 3 grams is sort of the well-known recommended therapeutic dose for anything systemic. So 3 grams of HCC per day for 2 months. And 100% of the participants came back and said it either partially or completely resolved their symptoms. And so that's pretty remarkable to see that 100% of patients, 100% of participants came back and said it helped me in some way. Whether that's, yeah, I feel a lot better, or I feel completely normal. And so this, again, needs more research. This is just one study, of course, but it's compelling. It's like, okay, people hear this, and especially if you have Lyme and you're kind of desperate, because and you're much more of an expert on this than I am, but from what I understand in my education around this and talking to people with Lyme, is like, there's generally like 2 different routes that you can go with treating or addressing the Lyme, which is like the kill route or the boosting your immune system route. And a lot of people go with the kill route, which just kind of makes you feel horrible and it can take a long time and whatever. But the boosting your immune system isn't, from my knowledge, always as effective as this other route. And so people kind of go this way more. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've had friends that have gone that route, and it just like basically like made things worse almost. They felt worse because of it. And then have gotten on AHCC, and it's completely transformed their life. One of my friends, Christina Rice, who's a big podcaster, and she's very skeptical. She came on, she invited me on her show. This is back in 2019, like right when I was first getting started. And the study had just come out, and I told her about it, and I said, just try it, doesn't hurt to try. So she tried it. She was extremely skeptical. I swear she brought me on her podcast to like debate and who are you really? Like, what is this stuff? I've tried everything. And she's big in the wellness space. And anyway, she tried it for she said it took her about 3 weeks to really feel the full benefits. Some people it's sooner than that. And she was like, I was able to get off all of my other supplements and just take this one thing, because she was taking a cabinet full of immune things and boosters and all of this. And she was like, I'm just going to take this and see how I feel. She started to feel amazing. She was also dealing with mold as well. And she was still pretty skeptical. So she stopped taking it completely, and all of her symptoms returned. She started taking it again and again, experienced the same relief. So she's one person that she's like, I will be on this the rest of my life, because it's absolutely changed my immune system and its response to the Lyme. So that's just, an anecdotal story. There are obviously many more people who have come to me over the years with similar stories, but that's, I think it's a really good place for people with Lyme to start. There's no negative side effects. It's simply, again, like increasing your immune surveillance and optimizing different pathways in your body, using a variety of mechanisms of action to support. And again, it's like full body support. There's not a system in the body that it doesn't positively affect. And so, yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that was beautiful because 100% of people at least got better. So, I mean, if you're listening to, I have this whole crazy approach where it's like you're doing the hair testing. I think the heavy metals play a big role. I also think that manganese is overlooked. It's a very common toxin that's in air pollution because we use it in car exhaust. Like we used to use lead, now we use manganese. And also, like I live by an airport, that there's manganese from that. There's manganese in geoengineering. So it's a very common toxin that a lot of detox programs overlook. And Lyme can kind of use manganese to evade the immune system, similar to how some pathogens use iron. You've heard like different things hide behind iron, and you got to get rid of your excess iron, through either phlebotomy or my program will actually detox iron as well. Or people use other kind of iron chelators, curcumin, and different things like that. So I have this approach with it, but it would be a good starting point if someone's already got Lyme. It's like, well, maybe just take this for a couple months, then we'll go into the hair test and then start to do some more deeper work, because it's interesting that as you were rattling off those symptoms there, I'll just give my own personal experience. I really thought I was just changing hair patterns or something, but I feel pretty good most days. I get hit with a wave of like a heavy metal elimination every now and again because they can take so long to come out of the system. But overall, feel pretty decent. But one thing that always kind of sticks with me a little bit is temperature regulation. And I've noticed since I've taken that, I am not as sweaty. And so, I've forgot to take it like the last like few days because we were doing Hack Your Health event and I was super busy, and it was our first conference that we did as a supplement company and all that. And I was like noticing that I was sweating. And then I'm like, okay, now that you say that, I'm going to start, because I haven't taken it like the last like 4 or 5 days because I've just been busy. So now I'm going to start taking it again, and I'm going to pay attention on whether or not I quit sweating again. Because that's kind of one thing where it's not like crazy bad, but like in the gym, or you just kind of notice that where you're like a little like musky, like when you're not supposed to be, really, when no one else is. You're like, what the hell? But overall, I feel good besides kind of one symptom that kind of lingers. And I thought maybe my hair test pattern, because people in slow oxidation, you might not know much about it, they generally sweat a little bit less, and people in fast oxidation sweat a little bit more. And I am in fast oxidation. So I thought maybe I was just changing back into slow oxidation from the hair test, because you can kind of go back and forth in between the two as you do the program. But maybe it was just the AHCC. Maybe my hair test should be back next week. So if I'm still in fast and I'm not as sweaty, I would have to say it's just from the product. So I guess maybe that's a live review, and I didn't really even think about it until you kind of just brought that up as a symptom. I'm like, starting to think back, like, hey, I haven't really been sweaty the last couple of weeks, and that's definitely super interesting. So yeah, because Lyme's tricky. Even a program like mine can take a long time, especially when people do have like Lyme and the co-infections, to really start to feel better. And sometimes they're some of my most sensitive clients as well. You start trying to detox them when they already have a lot of like neuroinflammation and stuff from Lyme. It can be kind of tricky. You kind of have to do very, very low and slow. And some of them give up because they don't, making stuff worse. And I mean, it's hard because I tried all of the kill everything. And then when I got more into like, all right, let's just remove toxins slowly, let the parasites come out and get the immune system ramped back up slowly over time. That's how that's worked for me. But yeah, I did $20,000 protocol with Dr. Minkoff and all this other crazy stuff before I got into that. But this definitely sounds like something I will 100% add in if someone comes to me with a Lyme diagnosis, or if you're just listening, maybe just give it a shot, because I do have a lot of Lyme listeners because I have so many shows about everyone from different Lyme. Just, people try to attack it from so many different angles, or just the herb angle, or just, the what I do with the metals and the manganese, or people have ozone. Like, people are just really trying to combat this thing from so many different ways, but it could be as simple as just this product. If 100% of people came back and said they at least had symptom relief,
Mm-hmm.
and then if I can get them symptom relief, maybe then we can go deeper on the detox
Yes.
stuff a little bit easier. Because sometimes when that immune system's overreactive and then you start to shuttle around some heavy metals or something, it's a lot for people. I
Yeah.
totally, my program was brutal. Most people probably wouldn't have went through what I went through, so I try to not, because I'm just like kind of crazy. I'll just keep pushing through no matter how bad I felt. But with my clients, I try to take it very gentle and low and
Yeah.
slow, because I know not everybody wants to feel like that. So if they do have something, some kind of diagnosis like this, I'm definitely going to check that out. What you mentioned a few other things earlier that you've seen. So we've done HPV, we've done Lyme. I mean, when you're just kind of balancing out the immune system, seems like maybe it works for almost anything. But are there any other like really good research for like autoimmune or something that you've seen with the AHCC?
Yeah, actually, a lot of the earliest, most compelling research is around liver disease and liver damage. So
Wow.
it's a really supportive to the liver, and there's been a bunch of different studies, things with like liver cancer and liver, severe liver disease. And I'm happy to, in general, send you a bunch of research that you could put in the show notes or have on hand
Yeah, that'd be cool.
if somebody's interested, because there's over 100 published papers and over 30 clinical trials, human trials with AHCC. So, if somebody's looking for something specific, there's a good chance that it's at least been looked at with AHCC. But yeah, liver disease is definitely one. I've seen, liver markers, liver blood markers, like just absolutely transform in a matter of weeks or months for people who have really struggled. Actually, one of the first physicians, Dr. Fred Pescatore, who wrote a book that I call my AHCC Bible. He was one of the first physicians to use AHCC in the United States. Again, it hails from Japan. And so he was using it on his hardest patients that he really was having a hard time figuring out or helping. And a lot of them did have liver disease. And so if somebody's struggling with liver health, it is a really great liver support. Definitely autoimmune conditions. I would say skin conditions as well. This is, everything from eczema, hidradenitis suppurativa, which is like really uncomfortable, like cystic boils that are deep in the skin that they think has an autoimmune, link somewhere, but really don't know much about it. But people who have this, who have HS, are miserable with this. Herpes for sure. We get that, like people who struggle with cold sores or, elsewhere, really, managing breakouts. And people that have struggled with cold sores, they know when one is coming on. They can like almost feel it in their skin. Maybe you had that experience too
Yes.
earlier,
I always
where
knew when it was coming.
you're like, I can feel it. It's coming. So they will actually double their dose and they'll be fine the next day. So it's really, really amazing. Like as I'm rattling, all of these things off, it's like, how does one thing have so many different uses? Again, it's supporting the immune system. It's decreasing systemic inflammation. Like if you were to look at CRP, as a blood marker for inflammation in the body, it can directly affect positively CRP. It's a really, really potent antioxidant, both directly and indirectly. So we see a lot of the research on cancer and chemotherapy, both people using AHCC to shrink tumors on their own and also alongside chemotherapy, because chemotherapy is really, really tough on the body. I think everyone knows that. It is not a walk in the park. It's really, really, it can cause liver damage. Obviously, you can lose your hair, your digestive tract is all messed up. You have, nausea and you're not hungry and things like that. And just your fatigue and kind of just malaise is like usually through the roof. So when people, they've studied a lot with HCC alongside chemotherapy, and what they find is that people who are going through chemotherapy, not only do they notice a better quality of life, like less hours in bed per day and just better energy and appetite, less hair loss, it's protective of the liver. during this process, but it's also increasing the anti-cancer effects of the chemotherapy. So again, we're keeping those NK cells, these assassins of the immune system, optimized, or at least higher than they would had you not, taken the AHCC alongside chemotherapy. So it's keeping these white blood cells and immune cells that are so important when you're going through something like cancer, optimized such that you have a better chance of recovering, getting through the chemo, feeling okay, and then, recovering and continuing to take AHCC to keep those anti-cancer benefits in place. So, yeah, there's actually most of the research is around cancer, chemotherapy, liver disease, and we're just kind of getting into some of these other, HPV and autoimmune and these other things. But that's really where the research started, was cancer and liver disease. Yeah.
That's actually remarkable. I actually think most people walking around have fatty liver in America, just the way we eat, the toxicity, the obesity. A lot of people chalk it up to like, their uncle who's like an alcoholic or whatever. But I think it's just very common for people just by the way we eat, the lifestyle, the toxicity, the lack of nature and sunlight. I think liver disease or fatty liver disease is very, very common, and fat around the visceral organs in general kind of clogs up all the system. Your liver is just trying to do so many things that it can't keep up with nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people feel great when they do liver flushes or, colon cleanses or, I do a lot of coffee enemas. I haven't done a liver cleanse, but I have one here. I'm going to do my first one soon. I think that they're pretty legit. But if you can just take a supplement that kind of helps with that, that's great. Now, I would imagine someone listening to this, if they go directly to their doctor when they're about to do chemo and then they're going to tell them, I'm going to take this supplement, I would imagine a doctor may or may not tell them to not take that, right? So would it be something, a kind of journey that, I'm not giving medical advice here, but I'm just saying It's probably a journey you're going to have to research and do on your own on the side, right? Probably without telling them, or be straightforward with them. What's the best route there? Do you just tell them, hey, I'm going to take this anyways? Or do you kind of just on the side do your research and just take it without telling them?
I mean, I always have to advise people. I'm not a medical professional.
Right.
Talk to your medical professional. This is not medical advice. I am simply a messenger of anecdotal evidence and, clinical research. And I can point to the clinical research all day, every day. What you choose to do with it, whether that's you print it out, hand it to your doctor, or email it to your doctor and show them the piles of research showing AHCC as safe to combine with most types of chemotherapy. I will say that there are, the pathway, I think it's CYP450-2D6 is the enzyme pathway that some chemotherapies are, metabolized through. And so there have been cases where AHCC can affect that enzyme pathway, that metabolism. It's not necessarily like dangerous per se, but I do always have to say, talk to your doctor, talk to the or the oncologist about this. But ultimately, you're in charge of being your own best health advocate. And I think the people that do the worst, no matter what the disease is, whether it's HPV or cancer or whatever, they only rely on their doctor to tell them exactly what to do for this disease, rather than deciding, hey, I'm an active participant in this healing process. I'm going to use my brain. I'm going to read. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to listen to podcasts. I'm going to educate myself on this disease. I'm going to know exactly what's going on in my body. I'm going to, figure out, are there other alternative ways that I could use alongside this treatment that my doctor's recommending? You are in charge of that. Like, you have to be your own best health advocate. So I encourage everybody to look into this. You can email me if you want to look at the studies. You can go to, PubMed or Google Scholar and simply type in AHCC and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of results come up. And I think people, at the risk of sounding, harsh, I think if you're only relying on your doctor to figure it out for you and to point you in the direction of healing, I think that's kind of foolish in 2025. I think that you should, talk to your doctor, listen to your doctor, but also listen to your intuition as well and read for yourself. So, I that could be a whole podcast in and of itself. But I think it's really important for us to take ownership of our experience and be our own best advocate.
Yeah, the world is your oyster. I really find it hard to believe that someone believes every single thing that their doctor tells them in 2025 when there's so much information you can't even keep up with it. And so it doesn't take,
Well,
go to your Spotify, go to your AI, go to whatever, and just type in what you're dealing with and see if there's an alternative solution or what's the risk reward on that thing. And, and sometimes you fall into it. Like my wife had some issues with pregnancy, and it was like bacterial vaginosis, or I don't even remember the diagnosis exactly, but it was some kind of yeast thing.
uh-huh.
And it was like if it doesn't get cleared, then she might have early labor, and then with early labor comes could NICU, or there's other issues when your baby's born prematurely. So in that scenario, I asked my doula, I did some research, I looked around, and finally we were like, okay, we're just going to take the little antifungal or whatever, when I really
Uh-huh.
didn't want to because I'm very natural. So but I did a lot of research and was like, okay, this sounds like I would rather just deal with this. I'll give the wife some probiotics. I'll give the baby some probiotics, and we'll do all the other right things. So I still went the pharmaceutical route because I was just scared of the early labor, right? And so, but I, at least looked around before I just took the thing that my doctor was saying, hey, you should take this. And we were even at a birthing center, and they were mostly natural, and they recommended it. So I was already kind of like, okay, if they're saying to do it, I'm still going to do some research. But then even
Yeah,
my doula was
smart.
like, yeah, because there's like other ways to treat that naturally, but it's not always as effective. And then that early labor kind of scared me, so I just went with it. So yeah, just do research around
Yeah,
everything.
you're
And
you're weighing risks and benefits,
mhm.
right? And that's what, in fully informed consent is. So you got your, fully informed consent where you're like, okay, here's the options, here's the risks and benefits of each. I am going to decide for myself and my wife and I, for our family, that this is the best route, knowing that there are still some risks, but these risks, outweigh these ones. And you're going about it the perfect way. Like, that's what we should all be doing for every situation with our health, is like, what are all the options here? Let me look at this, and what risks am I comfortable with? That's all that this is just weighing what risks are you comfortable with. And that's kind of different for every person, and it just comes down to you making an informed decision for yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. There's one thing I want to ask before we get off here. We should have spent more time on this, but I don't want to leave people hanging. It definitely deserves more time than what we have left here. But I know a lot of people, we spent time on the HPV, and then there's the HPV vaccine. Do you think that this is effective? I'll just, people on my show know that I'm like, I probably wouldn't take any vaccine. I'm just very skeptical of them all. But I always tell people, do your research, figure out which ones are the most harmful. If you think you should, delay it or do whatever. So I'm kind of open for whatever people want to do with their children and their body. Is there any, validity to this HPV vaccine? Do you ever recommend it for some people? Like, let's try, at least, I don't know if we have enough time, but at least a quick little breakdown so
Yeah.
I don't leave people hanging on that part of the HPV.
Yeah. I will try to be concise because I could come back and we could have a whole episode on this. But um, in short, I would not take that vaccine or give it to my child if you paid me $1 million. And I have I've been studying this for years, looking at not only anecdotal evidence from women that come to work with me, and help their heal their HPV. A lot of the women that I do work with that do have HPV did get the vaccine. So I'm not convinced that it really works that well. There was a whole problem. There's a lot of problems with the research that they submitted to the FDA, the data that they submitted to the FDA. That it's doctored, it's massaged quite a bit. And I would just say, there's some really big gaping holes that I'm happy to talk about. If someone is thinking about it for themselves or their child, because they start recommending this as early as 9 years old for boys and
Oh,
girls.
wow.
So if your pediatrician is recommending this to you and you're kind of like on the fence, I don't know, but I don't want them to get cancer. I don't know. You have time. There's no rush. Your 9-year-old's not going to be engaging in any orgies, right? Like, you can just wait and educate yourself. You can email me. I'm happy to answer your questions, but there's a book that I would want you to read before you make a decision on this particular vaccine. It's called The HPV Vaccine on Trial, and it's written by two lawyers, two litigators that got a hold of the raw data from Merck, which is the pharmaceutical company that, that created this vaccine. And they go through, it's dense, but it's worth it. Like, your child's health is worth it to read this book. But there's a lot of gaping holes with the research. And I would say if you already are diagnosed HPV positive, your doctor might recommend it for you because they want to recommend something. I don't think that all doctors are, bad people or malicious. It's not that they don't care about you. A lot of doctors want to recommend something. And they say, hey, there's this vaccine, you could take this vaccine. If you're already positive, it is not going to help clear an existing HPV infection. In fact, what these litigators find, these two women, is that Merck's own data show that if a woman is HPV positive and then takes the HPV vaccine, she is more likely to develop cervical dysplasia if she hasn't already. So if you've already been exposed to HPV and then take the vaccine, this is why they want it really young. They know this, and they want to give it really young, because if you've already been exposed to it, then you're at a higher risk of developing cervical dysplasia. So I would not take it. I would not recommend anyone in my family take it. My kids are definitely not going to take this vaccine. And I would just say, even on the CDC HPV website, the CDC themselves, that are super vaccine gung-ho, they say it will not clear an existing infection. So it's not recommended. This is just something that your doctor, it's one of the tools in their tool belt that they can say, oh, well, this could help with future infections. It's like, okay, back up. Let's just deal with what is going on right now today. And in my opinion, and many others, if your body's already overstressed and overtaxed and having a hard time clearing this, the last thing that your body needs is a hefty dose of aluminum, which is what you're going to get with the HPV vaccine. So, it doesn't take that much logic and digging to see that this is not actually that helpful. So, I tried to be really concise.
Yeah, it popped in my head, and I was like, I at least got to have her talk about it for a couple minutes, because that'll be a big one that people are going to ask about, because there's definitely, it's recommended, and some people have taken it. And I think I just haven't found a vaccine where I look at it and go, this actually is life-saving,
Well, they also didn't test it against a true placebo. They tested the HPV vaccine in the clinical trials against previous vaccines or an aluminum basically tonic, like an aluminum based salt that so in both groups, the placebo was not actually a placebo. So you can't call it a placebo controlled trial if it's not a true saline placebo. So when they look at the adverse events, this is the part just like boils my blood. When they look at the adverse events in these studies, the vaccine that contains a lot of aluminum and the aluminum salt that they're using as the placebo, there's a very similar rate of adverse events, around 50%. And so then they say, 49% and 51%. Well, that's a 2% difference. That's not statistically significant. Therefore, this is just as safe as the placebo. Well, when the placebo is straight up aluminum, it's crazy what they can get away with.
I mean, you have to tell me. That's what I sit around in my office all day detoxing people of heavy metals. And it's not only the vaccines, but it is just, that's one big exposure. And the actual injection of heavy metals is a lot different than if you eat like a tuna steak or something, where your body may actually only absorb like 10% of that mercury or cadmium or whatever's in that fish, because your organs of elimination, your gut and everything's going to get the rest out. It's still not good. I still don't recommend a lot of fish for people, because I see high mercury on tests for people who eat a lot of fish. But just in general, the injection bypasses all of that. And then, like, especially with little kids, they don't have a developed blood-brain barrier, and it doesn't block everything as well as like an adult. And even, even when kids are a little bit older, you see some vaccine side effects because it's kind of just entryway that's not normal. We would normally be ingesting these things or maybe breathing it, and then your lungs may filter that, or your kidney or livers. It's just a very unnatural way of being exposed to heavy metals, and that's why I think it causes some of that neurodegenerative stuff, or people get disabled, people get all kinds of crazy stuff you see online. So I haven't found one that I feel comfortable with, especially because my entire practice is around removing the heavy metals from lifestyle and from potentially vaccines. So awesome. I know we got to wrap it up here. Amazing show. I love the product. By the way, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but my wife and I love the actual other functional mushrooms that are turned into like a latte. We've been putting those in the coffee, and those are delicious. So if you guys like a delicious like coffee enhancer that's got mushrooms in it too, which I know a lot of people already put mushrooms in their coffee, check it out. It's delicious. But tell everyone what the website is, where they can find more information about you, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm having a flood of things that I could have said and should have said. One of those is that, we talked about a lot of diseases and conditions that HCC is very helpful for. But, if you're healthy and you just want to stay that way, like I don't have any systemic issues, but I take our Immune Intel AHCC on a regular basis because I want my immune system optimized year round. That's some of the most common feedback that we get is like, I just don't get sick anymore. So people that are just, healthy overall, but they're like, I used to get sick at at least 3 times a year, and I haven't been sick in, I haven't been personally sick in over, close to 3 years because I take it regularly. And that's, not me being in a bubble. I'm around nieces and nephews and snotty noses and tons of travel and things like that. So I did want to just touch on that it's for healthy people too that just want to stay that way. But yeah, so you can find Immune Intel AHCC, which is the highest quality AHCC that you're going to find. There are other brands out there that use just a sprinkle of AHCC and call it that, and it's not doing what I just, all the benefits that I just gave you. You're not getting a high enough dose. So Immune Intel is the highest quality that you're going to find. We don't use any other ingredients or excipients or anything like that. And you can find that and the Mushy Love Latte, as you're talking about, which is our other product, at themedicin.com. And Medicin is spelled without an E on the end. I'm sure you'll have a link in your show notes or whatever. And we can maybe talk afterwards, but I would love to give your listeners a discount if you want, and you can include that in the notes if you want as well. And then if anyone is having issues with HPV or you want to get some support, you can always go to clearhpv.com and you can schedule a free consult with me and we can talk through options and things like that. And that is myself and my colleague, Dr. Nathan Riley, who's a holistic OBGYN. We both help women and we've sort of tag team to get this good information and support out there for both men and women, but mostly women. And then if you have any other questions, you can always DM me on Instagram. I answer my own DMs. Give me a few days to get to yours, but my handle is Mimi_the Medicin.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and stick around while I close it out.